This is my world. It is my world beneath the sun. This is my place, where prairies lie and rivers run beneath the sky. It is here that I will be, where all is wide, and go forever free. This is my life. This is my life beneath the sun. This is my joy. And I may fly and I may run. This is the only time that I will live for all to see that we are wild and go forever free. This is my voice, and I will lift it to the wind on some wide wondrous wind. This is my song. It is the call from deep within for all to hear me when I sing.
This is a story about Wisconsin's wildlife and about the people who dedicate their lives to making sure these wild creatures and wild places will be forever free. Wisconsin's landscape is diverse and awe-inspiring, a vivid country quilt. Each piece of this living tapestry fits with its neighbor like an intricate puzzle. Rivers and streams stitch these pieces together in a grand, flourishing circle of life. Wisconsin's wildlife management professionals are stewards of a precious heirloom, Wisconsin's wildlife and wild places.
The most important mission that we as wildlife managers follow is to protect the resource, number one, and then to enhance the resource where possible. That is what dedicated wildlife managers who have committed their lives to the betterment of wildlife in Wisconsin live by.
Everything starts with the land. Everything that we as people do or need to survive is based somehow on natural resources.
As humans, we're called to be good stewards of the land, and we have a protection role, and there's a lot of responsibility that goes along with that to preserve and to manage healthy ecosystems. And not only is that good for wildlife, but it's good for us as people.
You start to see animals with deformities, or you start to see population declines, like for example declines in frog populations. Well, that's an indicator of something that's going on in the environment. And it's up to us to be monitoring the wildlife to make sure that they are healthy, because somewhere down the road it's going to affect us.
We have about 1.5 million adults in the state that actively participate in wildlife watching. And we still have about 750,000 people going out deer hunting for the 1 week of gun deer season every year, and a couple 100,000 people going after other species from waterfowl to grouse to rabbits. We have been charged by the legislature to manage wildlife for all of the public, regardless what their interests are. In the United States, wildlife is owned by the public. It's not owned by the landowner. Everybody has some kind of access to wildlife, whether for hunting or other purposes.
Wisconsin citizens value their natural inheritance. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people visit Wisconsin's wild places to find wildlife. Like Horicon Marsh, the largest freshwater cattail marsh in the United States. Or Creeks Meadows, part of 30,000 acres of wetlands and upland brush prairie, Wisconsin's largest wildlife management property.
Any opportunity to come up to Creeks and watch the sharp-tails out of the blinds is an experience of a lifetime. The best time to see cranes, if you'd like to come back for our open house in the fall, it's in October, and last year we had over 6,000 cranes here.
Really?
It's fabulous.
Really?
I've seen bald eagles working the coots out on Phantom, and then all of a sudden, bing, you know, they'll go down and they'll get one, and it's rather tragic if you're the coot.
There it is.
For many families in Wisconsin, about 1 in 4, wildlife has a practical value.
It provides food if you hunt it, or it provides the deer pelt that can be made into mittens or slippers.
As far as clothing, it's a very functional item, as the hat I'm wearing right now is made from muskrats, a renewable resource.
There have been recent surveys that have shown that hunting, together with wildlife watching, it's a huge industry. It adds up to $4.2 billion in economic activity in the state and 55,000 jobs.
Regular fishing season starts the beginning of May. Then it'll be real busy right through deer hunting the end of November.
We register the deer that are shot in the area.
It brings a lot of business to the store.
Whether it's the fishermen or it's small game or large game, they make up a good percentage of our business here. They make some of the best customers that there are.
Locally, I think we have a nice effort to publicize the Horkin Marsh, known worldwide. We work at providing a service for the visitors when they come here. Bird Festival, it's a community event. Waupun, Mayville, Horicon, and Fond du Lac all work together as part of this festival to make it work and make some money at it as well.
Wildlife recreation is a boost to Wisconsin's economy, but increased contact between people and wildlife causes conflicts, today's greatest challenge for wildlife biologists.
The primary thing that needs to be managed in wildlife management is people. It's kind of sad today that many of our citizens don't know anything further that bread comes from a grocery store.
Wisconsin has about 5 million people. That population is expected to grow. That will place increased pressures on the landscape and the uses of wildlife. We have an urban population. How do we connect those urban populations with the needs for wildlife conservation?
Salwey Prairie is a rare ecosystem. We have 400 plus species of wildflowers out here. This is one of the things that we have to deal with in an urban situation. We're looking at some evidence of some vandalism, damage done by some off-road vehicles. When we get a divot like this, we get destruction of vegetation, changing of the landscape.
What amazes me is people move out here and they don't care. They bring the suburbs, they bring the city here, and then they want everything looking like in the city.
If you like city life, stay in the city.
One of the things that we deal with down here is that we have development within our state ownership, which makes it difficult at times for management as well as preservation. As urban sprawl continues to widen out, we're having people run into more and more issues in dealing with wildlife. People may not like insects, they may not like snakes, but this area provides a home for all of them. And it's important that we preserve it so that they're able to use it. They have a right to be here too.
They're giant Canada geese. They've adapted to this nice short green grass, manicured lawns, no predators. To a goose, it's a dream come true. We've got a high population. The first step is to just bring the population down to what is an acceptable level. And that's a very controversial word because what's acceptable to you might not be acceptable to somebody else.
When these bear cubs were orphaned, DNR staff worked to place them, like an adoption agency, with a new mother.
Land use changes are happening all the time down here. And the further south we go, the worse it gets. We're in an area where bears and people are starting to come in close proximity. And if you've got anything out there that the bear would interpret as food, you're kind of asking for problems. Realize you're in bear country and just start, doing things to eliminate any nuisance problems. And more than likely, you're going to be able to live with these animals for a long time.
Wildlife managers in northern Wisconsin face different challenges than their urban counterparts. People head to the North Country because of its wildlife and wild spaces. But as they move north, people bring the problems of city life with them.
It's not the wild place that it perhaps once was. There's more and more people loving the Northwoods to death.
Increased pressure on the land as far as development. Land prices have gone up considerably, tripled probably in the last 5 years.
We're seeing private land prices that are outside the reach of many of the local folks.
It's not the same old good old north where you could wander on your neighbor's land and hunt rabbits. There's just a lot of no trespassing signs now where there didn't used to be as many.
The public use is just tremendous in some of our waters. Almost all of our larger lakes have very few lots available anymore. They're almost completely ringed by houses. And now we're starting to have the second tier of houses surrounding the first tier that's right on the lakeshore. We're seeing habitat decimated. We are seeing a decline in the number of lakes that are producing common loons because of the activity, whether it be from jet skis or from motorboats and people skiing. or people that are chasing loons around because they're getting a kick out of it, making the loon dive.
Habitat management is key to wildlife management because animals cannot survive without their habitat.
The land has got functioning communities. It's got lots of different pieces, and all those pieces work together to help the whole thing survive.
One of the main tenets of ecology, of course, is to keep all the pieces.
When we lose a piece here and a piece there, the system starts to break down. You try to maintain as many species as you can in the area because they all work together.
We're trying to move toward ecosystem management and biodiversity management.
The biggest thing with diversity is that you have to have a nice large block of habitat for animals to use. And when we start having the patchwork here and there, different species that might use the area have a difficult time in maintaining their population levels.
To provide needed habitat for wildlife and wildlife recreation, DNR biologists have purchased hundreds of thousands of acres of land.
We can't all afford to buy our own large marshes and forests. These are public lands, something that we all share and we all have a responsibility for.
One of the best projects I've worked with over the years is our Natural Areas program, where we have these real gems that we want to protect and prevent any development.
In the state overall, we've got like 250 wildlife management area properties. Each particular county has some unique habitat that is really critical to retain and to maintain for wildlife management purposes.
Wildlife management areas alone can't provide all the protection wildlife need to survive.
Just wanted to stop by giving you an update on what's happening down at the prairie.
So DNR staff work with private landowners to extend wildlife habitat beyond the fence lines of public properties.
16 acres.
And if that gets lost, it's gone forever.
One of the main features of our Department of Natural Resources acquisition is that we only buy from willing sellers.
We work with a lot of different landowners. They give us a call and we go out and we look at their property, and each property has some characteristics that we can certainly enhance. This whole area, it was corn and it was alfalfa. There was none of this wildlife out here that we have here now. We have the egrets, we have the great blue herons, we have the greenbacked herons, frogs, toads, salamanders, and all we really had to do was put in a little dike and eliminate the ditch system that was draining this area, and then put the permanent grassland cover around it. It's kind of what private lands management is all about. If you do the habitat work, the wildlife will come.
Once the DNR either purchases a new wildlife management property or negotiates a conservation easement on private land, the field work begins. Each habitat requires the best management practice, one that imitates nature.
Fire played a key role throughout the history of pre-settlement Wisconsin and the upper Midwest. Since man has instituted fire suppression, we've lost a lot of this type of habitat. So on public areas like this where we're trying to manage for upland brush prairie, we use prescribed burning as a tool. It'll top kill most of the brush.
Watching for spot fires?
We patrol the boundaries while the fire is burning so it doesn't come out of control. Wildlife loves a freshly burned over area. It greens up in the summer and attracts a lot of bugs and other forage base for a wonderful complex of game and non-game animals.
Wildlife biologists and technicians also plant thousands of acres of native grasses and wildflowers each year.
Because of the proximity to the wetland that we have out here, it was important to add an additional amount of grassland to the surrounding area because of the importance of these grasslands as nesting cover for waterfowl, pheasants, and songbirds. The tall grass over here we call big blue stem is what we've been going to more in probably the last 10 to 15 years to duplicate a little bit of what that original landscape looked like.
Wetlands are another critical ecosystem that wildlife management staff protect and enhance. They spend many hours moving tons of dirt and water to enhance the attractiveness of wetlands to wildlife.
A natural cycle of a wetland is to go through a series of drawdowns where it dries out over time. Initially, when you start a drawdown, you'll see waterfowl utilizing it. Migratory birds are going to benefit from it, but it also benefits other species, especially the residential ones like the beaver, the muskrats, mink. As you begin to start creating a mud flat, you'll see some of your long-legged shorebirds starting to utilize the fringes. Once you get down so far with your wetland and you get to the short-legged shorebirds, You've pretty much reached the bottom of your drawdown. You'll get your production of your vegetation, and then of course you do the reversal when you start to reflood an area.
Back in the early 1900s, central Wisconsin was ditched. A lot of the natural streams that were in this area were destroyed. So what we're planning to do today is to connect this man-made drainage ditch to divert that back into the stream channel. We'll be restoring a stream flow that had not occurred in probably over 90 years. We're not really doing this for any specific wildlife species. We're trying to restore some of the natural strands of the web of life, a home for a whole wide host of wildlife species.
Managing forests to increase their attractiveness to wildlife means selectively cutting or clear-cutting stands of oak and aspen, mowing small openings in large forests, or sometimes letting a few areas mature into old growth.
A lot of wildlife depends on early successional forest in the north, and our forest is maturing up there. If we don't actively manage our lands, they do grow up into older, mature forests.
As a result of this timber harvesting, there's a lot of wildlife species that we benefit. We get tremendous deer usage in these cutover areas. A lot of songbirds utilize them. They're great nesting areas.
Our county forest is managed in cooperation or in partnership with DNR. The state pays us 10 cents for every acre of county forest land that we have, and we use this money for the maintenance of wildlife openings. And the wildlife manager at Mercer assists us. We do our planning together and come up with a wildlife management plan.
For long-range land use planning.
Wildlife biologists spend time indoors, too. They coordinate their planning efforts with professionals in other bureaus. They keep the public informed about wildlife health issues, draft hunting and trapping rules and regulations, and raise thousands of dollars of grant money for wildlife conservation. DNR staff also worked with Native Americans and with the Conservation Congress and other conservation groups. DNR staff use every modern means to do their jobs. They use airplanes to survey wildlife populations, digital cameras to document and report tracking surveys, and radio telemetry to manage wildlife and wild places.
We scientifically manage our wildlife resources in Wisconsin. We take a look at all the parameters that we possibly can, the birth rates, the death rates, the disease.
We count animals that don't want to be counted. Most animals are secretive. They don't present themselves where it's easy for a wildlife biologist to count them. So we have to rely on mathematical equations to assist us. We do many different wildlife surveys, everything from frogs and toads to surveying timber wolves.
Wildlife managers also get involved with upland bird surveys, pheasant crowing surveys, ruffed grouse drumming surveys, and summer deer observations.
Having quite a few years of this type of information is really critical to the survey because it's the trends that are important.
Wildlife management as a science is anything that we do to intentionally affect wildlife populations.
We're working on one extreme with animals that are so abundant that they are actually a nuisance. And we work almost the exact opposite extreme with endangered species.
The timber wolf reappeared in the North Woods during the 1970s. Wolves are no longer an endangered species in Wisconsin, and today, DNR biologists are monitoring the growing population. DNR field staff works to reestablish populations of animals that once thrived in Wisconsin, but were eliminated through destruction of habitat, market hunting, or overtrapping.
13 of them.
The pine marten, a Northwoods member of the weasel family, has also been reintroduced into the wilds of Wisconsin. Biologists must always monitor the health and welfare of experimental animals for the good of the captive animals being released and for wildlife already living there. In 1995, the Department of Natural Resources cooperated with the University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point to release an experimental herd of 25 elk into the Chequamegon National Forest. Today, that herd has increased, and biologists are evaluating sites for future releases. Managing an individual species can also mean assisting them in one or more critical parts of their life cycle, from nesting to resting.
Not only does the Bureau of Wildlife Management manage game species, but they also deal with many non-game species. We have a number of bats in Wisconsin This abandoned mine shaft that has been modified to keep people out is the site of the largest hibernating colony of bats in the entire Midwest. And the Bureau of Wildlife Management is actively involved in their management.
Wildlife management staff provide opportunities for wildlife recreation, hunting in particular, and have ever since the wildlife management program was founded by hunters in the 1930s.
Wisconsin traditionally is a strong hunting state. Hunting provides access to outdoor recreation, which helps build both the body and the spirit. It forms a connectedness of the hunter with the species they're hunting.
Oh, look, Marley. Hunting and trapping are some of the tools that wildlife biologists use in managing populations. It's an otter. It's a beautiful otter. We have dozens and dozens of laws that help to improve and protect the humane treatment of animals. To not manage a resource, in other words, to not trap, to not hunt, not fish, oftentimes will put those populations in jeopardy. A muskrat is a good example. It's a renewable resource that if you don't use it, you will lose it. You can see these different bite marks in here that occurred as a result of an overpopulation of muskrats. Without space, they start chewing on each other.
Hunters are important because they help us as a management tool for species that do become overabundant. Really the only feasible way over such a large landscape as Wisconsin to control those populations is through hunting that's regulated in an ethical way that makes sure that we don't take too many of any species in any particular area.
We count on the continued support of the public to continue to provide revenue. Up until now, at least, the folks that have footed the majority of the bill have been hunters and anglers, the licensed buyers.
Wisconsin is among the top few states for many of the conservation organizations as far as memberships and amount of money people donate for the causes of wildlife management. What's very encouraging is the growth in partnerships that we have with various conservation organizations. They're providing staff in some cases, they're providing money in many cases, they're providing support in the legislature for laws that would benefit wildlife and the people that enjoy them.
The Chilwaukee Prairie Plan was developed by a number of groups, a partnership. We've got Kenosha County, EW Parkside, the Nature Conservancy. It's just a growing partnership and something that we're going to see more and more in the future.
Maintaining Wisconsin's wildlife and wild places takes DNR wildlife management staff to local schools and community groups. They share their own deep respect for the natural world. They encourage appreciation for the great circle of life, of which death is a necessary part.
We are fortunate to have an ecology club at Hurley High School that will come out and check houses with us, take out the old nest material, replace it with shavings for next year's nesting.
They help people understand how to be better stewards of the land and of the wild creatures that live here with us.
There's something about being outside, about being connected with something wild that makes these areas very important. I personally think it kind of cleanses our souls.
Once you love the outdoors, that stays with you for the rest of your life.
In a world with an expanding human population that routinely degrades wild places and displaces wild animals from their homes, the Wisconsin DNR Wildlife Management Program is seeing hope for the future.
We have a deer population, which is a very popular species. People enjoy seeing them, enjoy being able to hunt them. That's obviously a success story. Bald eagles off of the endangered and threatened list. We now have a population of 200 wolves in the state, 14,000 black bears. We have turkey populations almost statewide. All great success stories that can be attributed to the system of wildlife conservation that we have in the state of Wisconsin.
You can do it. In my opinion, most of the DNR employees, they are very dedicated to what they do. They have core values. They try to preserve what we have.
As a wildlife biologist, I'm in a position where I can pass on some of the stewardship ideals and goals and actually be out there managing public land and being a good steward myself.
I am very proud of our workforce. It's not just a job, it's a life calling. They live and breathe wildlife, but they talk about it on their breaks on weekends, and The dedication of that workforce is something that I'm proud of and thankful for.
The career is very rewarding. The dividends are not paid in terms of dollars, they're paid in being out there in the woods, seeing that what you're doing is making a difference for the future. Not just for the natural resources benefits, but for the benefit of humanity that will come after us generations from now.
You find days where you're here early and you go home late. It's a great career. I wouldn't trade it in for anything from here on out.
I'll never consider this a job. I just have too much fun, and if I ever lose that, I'll worry about myself.
These are the hearts. They are the hearts that find the ways. These are the ones who care. They are the keepers of the day with their helping hands. They reach with strength to those in need to keep them wild and go forever free. It is the way, it is the promise that is given to keep the circle of life for all. This is the dream, it is the fire in the living that drives the heart until it heeds the call.
What is the value of seeing a trumpeter swan, a flight of geese, or a nice natural woodlot in the fall colors? And what do we need to do as responsible citizens to take care of it? I love the wonderful quote from Aldo Leopold: "We abuse land because we see it as a commodity belonging to us." When we begin to see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to treat it with love and respect. We take good care of nature, nature will take care of the wildlife.
This is the time, the only time that we will share this world together and together be. This is the path that we will take around the bend, always one and forever free. Always one and forever free. Always one and forever free.